Imagine building an empire so powerful the government literally has to step in and destroy it. Now imagine that very act makes you even richer. And no, this isn't some Hollywood script. It's the unbelievable true story of John D. Rockefeller, a guy who basically owned an entire industry and then kind of bent reality to his will. This is the Rockefeller paradox, and it all kicks off with a lesson he learned when he was just a boy.
So check this out. At the absolute height of his power, this is how much of America's oil John D. Rockefeller controlled: 90%. It was a stranglehold unlike anything the world had ever seen. The big question is, how on earth did one man get that much control? Well, the answer starts with a lesson he learned as a kid, a really, really cruel lesson.
These words came directly from John's father, a con artist who actually called himself Devil Bill. And he wasn't just a bad influence, he was a walking, talking masterclass in how to deceive people. And you better believe he made sure his son learned every single one of his brutal lessons.
Okay, so to really understand the man who built Standard Oil, you first have to get your head around the two completely opposite forces that created him. His mother, a woman with this unshakable faith, and his father, a man who had, well, no morals at all.
I mean, just look at the contrast here. It's wild. His mother, Eliza, she taught him all about honesty and hard work. But his father, Devil Bill, he taught him that cheating was a good thing. He used to brag, "I cheat my boys every chance I get. I want to make them sharp." There's this famous story where he told a young John to jump from a chair, promising he'd catch him, and then he just stepped aside and let him crash right onto the floor. The lesson? It was simple, and you can bet John never forgot it. Trust is a weakness.
So when Devil Bill finally disappeared for good, abandoning the family, a 16-year-old John had to step up and become the man of the house. He just threw himself into the only thing in the world he felt he could actually trust: numbers. He became this incredibly meticulous bookkeeper, tracking every single penny he earned or spent in a little red book he called Ledger A. And this obsession with accounting? It would become his single greatest weapon.
Rockefeller first got into business as a produce merchant, but when oil was discovered over in Pennsylvania, he saw the future. And he wasn't interested in all the wildcatters digging wells. No, he was focused on the refining process, the one bottleneck in the whole system that he knew he could control.
Now, his business partner, a guy named Morris Clark, was terrified of debt and the absolute chaos of the oil boom. The tension between them just kept growing until they decided there was only one way out. They'd auction off their refinery to each other. Clark figured he could easily outbluff this quiet 25-year-old bookkeeper. He was, very, very wrong.
After this really tense bidding war, Clark offered $50,000, totally sure he'd won. But John, without even blinking, came back with this: $72,500, a massive fortune at the time. Clark just threw up his hands and gave up. As Rockefeller said later, "That was the day that determined my career."
As soon as the refinery was his, he applied that bookkeeper's obsession to every single part of the business. While other refiners were just dumping waste products like gasoline and tar into the river, he saw them as new revenue streams. He turned that sludge into lubricating oil and paraffin wax. He bought his own forests to make his own barrels. By owning every step and monetizing every single drop, he could sell his kerosene cheaper than anybody else and still make an absolute killing.
So, in 1870, Rockefeller created Standard Oil, and his goal wasn't just to be the biggest company. It was to be the only company. He looked at the hundreds of competing refineries not as rivals, but as just a big mess that needed to be cleaned up and brought under his control. He was about to build a machine designed to swallow every single one of them.
And to do this, Rockefeller looked to the railroads, the lifeblood of the nation. He decided to form a secret alliance, a cartel, that would make it mathematically impossible for anyone else to compete. This secret weapon had a name: the South Improvement Company. And this just shows you how ruthless he was. First, he got huge secret discounts on shipping his oil. Second, the railroads basically became his spies, feeding him intelligence on all his rivals. But that third part, that was the masterstroke. For every single barrel a competitor shipped, the railroad would take a cut of their shipping fee and give it directly to Rockefeller. He was literally being paid by his competition to put them out of business. It's insane. He'd invite rivals to his office and just calmly lay out the facts. Either sell your company to me or I will crush you. One owner refused. So the story goes, Rockefeller walked him over to the open window of his 6th-story office and just mused about how a fall would only take about 6 seconds. The message was crystal clear. Resistance was pointless.
This whole campaign became known as the Cleveland Massacre. Now, when the public eventually found out about the South Improvement Company, the outrage was so huge that the whole scheme got shut down. But it didn't really matter. By then, Rockefeller already owned Cleveland, which was the oil capital of the world.
With Cleveland in his pocket, he started starving out his rivals in other states. This strategy is called vertical integration. He bought the companies that made barrels, the chemical plants, the warehouses. If you wanted to refine oil, you couldn't even get the basic supplies without going through him. He even fought literal pipe wars to stop independent companies from building their own pipelines. And to manage this huge, legally shady empire, his lawyers came up with the Trust in 1882, basically a legal ghost that owned everything.
For years, the Standard Oil Trust seemed completely invincible, this shadowy empire that answered to nobody. But two people were about to step up and challenge the king. A journalist with a very personal grudge and a president who absolutely loved a good fight.
So, Ida Tarbell's father was one of the many oil men Rockefeller had ruined. For 2 solid years, she painstakingly documented every secret deal, every shady rebate, every single ruthless tactic. Her series of articles became a best-selling book that absolutely electrified the nation. She even exposed the fact that Rockefeller was the son of that wanted con man, Devil Bill. The public outrage gave President Teddy Roosevelt all the ammo he needed to sue, and in 1911, the Supreme Court delivered its final verdict. The empire had to be destroyed.
The whole world celebrated. Everyone believed the monster had finally been defeated, but they had forgotten the very first lesson Rockefeller ever learned: never trust anyone completely. The last entry in Rockefeller's life ledger would contain the greatest twist of all.
Okay, so this is where the story gets really interesting. The trust was shattered into 34 separate companies. You'd recognize the names today, like Exxon, Mobil, and Chevron. But here's the twist. Rockefeller kept his personal stock in all 34 of them. So, as these new companies started competing with each other right at the dawn of the automobile age, the value of his shares didn't just grow, they exploded.
The government's attempt to destroy him ended up making him the world's first confirmed billionaire. By 1916, his personal fortune hit $1 billion. And this was at a time when the average American was making just $800 a year. He had beaten everybody. Again.
So with all the money in the world, and his reputation completely in tatters, Rockefeller started his final campaign, a total rebranding. He hired the world's very first PR experts. He started these huge philanthropic projects, founding universities and funding medical research that ended up saving millions of lives. The ruthless monopolist was slowly and methodically transformed into this kindly old grandfather who handed out shiny new dimes to little kids.
Which leaves us with the ultimate question, right? Was this a genuine act of atonement for a life of predatory business, or was it the final, most brilliant con from the son of Devil Bill, a man who knew that in the end, the only thing that matters more than money is controlling the story?